You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. MPL listeners, big announcement before we get into the episode. Because we had so much fun with our inaugural MPL Live event in Austin, we have decided to make MPL Live a recurring event that we do on a quarterly basis. And we've decided that our next in-person event will be in Miami on December 10th. The theme of the event will be the manager dilemma, and we've got another all-star lineup in store. We'll have 3 former MPL guests: Melanie Naranjo, who's the Chief People Officer at Athena. Shout out Melanie, she just got promoted. Dominic Boone, the VP of Talent and Org Development at Liberty Latin America, and Cleo Knowles, the Chief People Officer at SH Hotels. And then we're going to have 2 newbies to the MPL world, so brand new guests to the show. Rosanna Durthy, the VP of Global Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at LinkedIn, and Jen Fisher, who is the former Chief Wellbeing Officer at Deloitte. It's going to be the exact same format from MPL Live Austin. We got really good feedback. People seemed really happy with the 2 hours of networking that we save after the live podcast. So if you plan on being there, I highly recommend grabbing your tickets now. We really hope that we see you guys there. This could be a fun event to fly in for, or if you are Miami based and you want to bring your entire team, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. I can offer some group ticket pricing. But yeah, we're really looking forward to this event and hope to see you guys in Miami. Oh, by the way, the link to go register is going to be in the show notes. So just click into the show notes and you can find the link there. All right, now back to the show. Michelle, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to MPL. It's always fun having an actual listener come on to the show. So yeah, we're so happy to have you here. How's your week going?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no, happy to be here. I'm a huge fan, so I am really excited to be here. My week's going great.
Well, we're just as excited to have you. And as you know, we start the episode the same way every single time, and that's with good news stories. And we like for our guests to go first. So if you have something, we'd love for you to kick us off.
I'm prepared to go first. So it's a little bit different than maybe something good that just happened this week, but October is kind of a month in my life where lots of big changes have happened. Great changes, scary changes, but in the month of October, I became a mom for the first time. So my oldest turned 17 this month. And it's also the month of our wedding anniversary. So next Tuesday, my husband and I celebrate 19 years together, married. So yeah, so October is always like a really great month as a family. So that's my good news story.
Well, congratulations on 19 years. And well, how old did you say your kid is now?
17. And
17,
then our younger one really likes to get it in there that it's also his half birthday. So it's the full birthday, a half birthday, and a wedding anniversary.
It's a lot going on.
Big month.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I guess, Steven, do you want me to go next? So my good news, I guess similarly, October's always maybe not a month of like big change. Like there's been big change on some Octobers, but it's always a month of reflection, especially the last 5 years. One of my best friends passed away 5 years ago. And every year since, we have this big celebration in October to celebrate him. His name was Jansen. So we do something called J-Day, and that's happening on Saturday. And it always feels like a big reunion. His entire family will be there. All of my friends will be there. We'll have football games on. I love it, Steven. Yeah. And I don't know, like I said, it always forces me to sort of reflect on all of the change that's happened over the last 5 years. And in the last 5 years, I've gotten married. I've changed jobs a couple of times. I've gotten laid off. We, turned the Modern People Leader into a business. More changes to come in the near future. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty grateful for life and for everything that I have in my life. And I'm excited for this weekend.
I love that.
Think that leaves me. So I'll explain what I was just flashing to anyone that's watching the video, the YouTube version of this. I'll explain what you just saw. First, my good news. I mentioned right before we hit record that this episode will be a little on the shorter side because I need to go get my daughters so that we can all promptly arrive to a soccer game. So if you watch this show, you'll know that I'm a huge soccer fan, football fan. I often wear my favorite English Premier League team hat on this show. And tonight, my love of soccer will extend to women's soccer, which is like totally different pace, totally different style, tactics, but so fun to watch. And it's just like a cool thing that to share with my daughters. And so my oldest daughter is an aspiring collegiate soccer player. So we're all super, super excited about that. And plus one to Daniel's good news. J-Day is a big celebration to celebrate Jansen. And my addition to Daniel's good news is I will be showing up with what we call Trippy Bear. So I was the CEO and I thought I was a CEO of an engagement survey company, and we were pretty small, really tight group. And we would do these culture every month, every other month. We would do some sort of like culture building team exercise or team event. And we decided to go to Dave & Buster's, and we amassed, I forget how many tickets. We just like crushed it. And we all pulled our tickets, and we couldn't figure out like how to spend all these tickets. Everyone needed to get home. And Jansen says, that's it, and points to Trippy Bear, the bear that I just flashed. And I have been the proud owner of Trippy Bear for a long time, since like 2018, I think is when we got him. And will be traveling to J-Day this year with Trippy Bear because it's time to find him a new home. So I'm hoping there are a lot of Deadhead fans at this event. So I'm hoping that I won't be dumping Trippy Bear, but he will find a nice home to live at least a few more years. So that's my part 2 of good news stories.
That's
Trippy
awesome.
Bear. Hadn't seen that in a while.
It's been a while. So this isn't about us or Trippy Bear. This episode today is about you, Michelle. And, we're super excited to hear your story and for you to share that with our audience. You've listened to the show before. I call this a Brene Brown question. Like, what's your story? Like, tell us how you developed in your career and got to the point at which you are VP of Learning and Development at Albertsons.
Yeah, so I actually went to school to be a teacher. And after I graduated, I went into the credential program, and they put me in a kinder class. And I was 21. I was the youngest in my family, hadn't really grown up a lot around small kids. And so just singing the song about a bear, ironically, and having a moment of, I don't know that I can do this for the rest of my life. Right. And I kind of thought about the fact that maybe I should just try out corporate America. And hey, if it doesn't work out, there's really no ageism in teaching. I could always go back and be a teacher. But I think that being 21, this is probably the time to try something out. So I did. Mortgage was really big back then. I took a coordinator job at a mortgage company in the recruiting department in HR. And I just started a series of career pivots. I mean, I grew to a recruiter position there. I hated that. I moved on to do business to business sales for a mortgage lender. Hated that. I got laid off along with everybody else and was pregnant and had to find a job. So had to do a stint in property management. It's literally amazing that I did not get fired from that job. It's probably because I was pregnant that they didn't fire me. I was so bad at property management. And after I had my son, I was officially miserable. I cried every day. I'd go outside and call my husband, and I would say, today's the day. I'm quitting. I can't do this. I leave my baby every day. I can't do this. And he said, I get it. And we have a mortgage and we have a baby. And I need you to go back upstairs and sit down at your desk and figure out what you want to do next. But like, please don't quit. And so I did. I thought about what have I done at that point in my career that I actually enjoyed. And the thing that I enjoyed was when I was on the recruiting team, my boss at the time let me take over team meetings. And I had gone to Barnes and Noble and bought literally Training for Dummies, the book. I don't even know if that series still exists. It should. It was great. Read it cover to cover and took over team meetings, and it was the happiest I'd ever been. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a real career pivot this time. So I went back to school, got my master's, restarted my career in L&D, took a coordinator job at a construction company. Had my second son when I was finishing my master's. We finished my thesis together. We delivered it together. And I've just never looked back. I've been really, really lucky to have amazing leaders that I've worked for that have helped the trajectory of my career once I made that decision to just follow what I really love to do. And that's how I got here.
Stephen, when I first met Michelle, I told her you were an elementary school teacher, then you went into recruiting, and then you went into sales. Like, you just love to torture yourself. Like, those are like...
I know. The best was me selling myself to these these high up mortgage
property management. I forgot about that too.
Executives. Yeah, property management. That didn't even make like the LinkedIn profile even at the time. But even selling myself to get the sales job was definitely an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I can relate. My last job as a HR practitioner was for a huge mortgage lending arm of Goldman Sachs. And, so real estate finance in Texas, and that had never had a diversity function. And my last project was launching diversity. And so just like the PTSD that I went through that experience, I can only imagine being early to career in all the struggles that you had in that industry, because it's a different world. It really is.
It is. Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
And so I think almost everybody, at least US folks, would have heard of Albertsons, but might not be familiar with all of the brands that are part of Albertsons. Can you share a little bit more about the company?
Yeah, so Albertsons is 160 years old, and it is 160 years of mergers and acquisitions. So that's why when you mentioned brands, we have a lot of what we call banners. So like in Chicago, you're going to see Jewel Osco. Here in California, where I'm at, you're going to see Albertsons, Pavilions, Vons. Where you guys are, I'm not sure about Austin, but I know in Dallas, you'll see Tom Thumbs. So there's lots of different brands, but we are a US grocery store, and we have roughly 2,200 stores, and we have about 250,000 associates.
So massive. It's that HR is a massive organization, I have to imagine, at Albertsons.
Yeah,
well,
it is.
It gives me a lot of excitement to jump into these conversations, because we talk to small companies, mid-sized companies, and not as many like what I would call like mega enterprises. And I think you guys are closer to that scale in terms of size and number of employees. And so you mentioned in our prep call that we're not moving fast enough. And when I say we are not moving fast enough, like work is changing. The way our behaviors as human beings seems to be changing as it relates to the workplace. Everything seems, tech stacks are changing. Gen AI is changing everything. There's so much change happening in the workplace. It still feels like change is slow. At least that was kind of what I'm hearing. And so I'm just curious, like when you think like we're not moving fast enough in redesigning work, like what does that mean to you?
So exactly all the things you just listed have changed. And the one thing that has not changed is the standard 5-day, 40-hour work week that was developed 100 years ago. 100 years ago. or almost 100 years ago. And in 1926, when Ford implemented it, it was to get away from the 6 and 7 day work week, and it was to stop working 12 hours a day. And I think that we're not moving fast enough with making the big change that needs to happen, which is rethinking the work week after 100 years of this rigid kind of schedule.
Yeah, that's something that we keep talking about on the show. Like I think of the Nick Bloom conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and we went into the conversation around the 4-day work week, and he basically said that he's seen no evidence that we'll ever move in that direction, at least like in the US, uh, where, we always want more. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know.
I
Like, do
know.
you do
I
you
know.
think we'll ever get there?
Yes.
Like, you think so? Okay.
Yes.
Say more.
Yes. Um, I think we have to get there. I think that what we are all doing a really good job of is talking about where we are as humans right now in the society. So we already know we have a mental health crisis. We already know that we have a physical health crisis. We already know that suicide's up. We already know that burnout's a problem. The Surgeon General came out with a warning that parents are not okay. Like, we know all of these things. And I think that a lot of what we're trying to do to fix the world that we're in right now, it just feels like a lot of bubblegum and tape sometimes. And I think with most things, you can only put band-aids on stuff for so long before you have to really rethink the root cause. I think we're going to get there. I do. How long is it going to take? I don't know. Ford implemented the new work week in 1926, and it wasn't official for the US until 1938. So I don't know if we really have to wait that many years or if we can fast track this. But I do. I think that also post COVID, I think what COVID did, one of the things COVID did was overnight, it gave an entire population the experience of having agency and autonomy over your own schedule. And too many people have experienced that, and we're not going back. And so the whole conversation is around return to office right now. I think that's the wrong conversation. I think it's how do we fundamentally change the way we work? Because all of the conversations that you listen to around 4-day work week, I think are mostly about, but we do this work this way. How do we get the 40 hours into a 4-day work week? And I think that's the problem. I think it's, why are we still working this way? I mean, if you spend any time on TikTok with the videos about corporate America, you can pick out 5 things that we can just like stop doing immediately that will give time back to people. And when I was at Taco Bell for 8 years, we had a 4.5-day work week. It works all year, all year. We were the pilots for Yum. They used to do holiday hours, and then they used to do summer hours. And everybody, and when you transitioned from summer hours out and you had to make it to holiday hours, there was like a light at the end of the tunnel. Once you got through the holidays, it was a deep, dark, depression because you had so many months to get back to 4.5-day work weeks. It works. I've seen it work.
I feel that I would have been one of the individuals in the deep depression. Like, yeah, that feeling is real when you have something that's working, and when it goes away, it's like dread. It's like absolute, like life is ending, it feels like. And so just so we can set context, so what is Albertsons' working model? Are you guys hybrid? Like, what would you say is the general approach to the workplace for Albertsons?
I would say Albertsons is hybrid. Pre-pandemic, everybody at the corporate office, because so we have a corporate office and then we have division offices. Everybody at the corporate office that got hired pre-pandemic would be relocated to Boise, Idaho. When we had our new CEO and new CPO start, they changed the model for what the talent strategy was going to look like. And they started using the division offices as offices that people could then be like associated with. So it's definitely a hybrid. And it really is a like just having a purpose to go into the office. And I know a lot of companies are doing that because it's not all or nothing. It's
Right.
not you have to stay home or you have to be in the office. So I think the balance is important.
And so here, so I was just curious,
Yeah.
just to understand, like, as we talk about these things. So you mentioned COVID, and I think, well, first of all, I agree that a lot of the current labor laws, the approach to employment, all stems from these post-industrial revolution, post-World War II was probably the next
Mm-hmm.
innovation on post-industrial revolution. And so point being is these are old, really, really old, archaic ways. If you think about what the world looked like post-World War II, like it was radically different. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact that the way we work, the construct of work itself is largely exactly the same when so much has changed is, there's that. Moving past that though, and you mentioned COVID, and I think COVID is really, really important. Another thing, and I have two daughters, as I mentioned earlier, during COVID, the way that Gen Alpha learns totally changed as well. So, and there's so many things in this world that are targeting the younger generation. If we just look at like consumer trends, it's all about the youth, right? Everything else is lagging. It's like, how do we
Mm-hmm.
capture this? Well, these generations, because I think it straddles two generations, they have now learned to work asynchronously. Everything that you
Mm-hmm.
do in school is now asynchronous. And if you want to know like what your kid is doing, it's online. If
Right.
you have any questions, it's online. It's in the Canva page or it's in
Yep.
whatever tool they're using. And so that to me is a huge future force that is going to be a force to reckon with, because how do you convince a generation that has only worked asynchronous, his own, this is fundamental to the way they do things, that like, no, you're going to have to follow these kind of 50, 60-year-old, this old way of looking at it when
Mm-hmm.
everything they know is different. Because
Right.
my daughters don't really remember what life was like before COVID. That's a whole nother
No.
topic.
Yeah.
But so this is all they know.
I know. But you know what's interesting about that? So my kids were in fourth and sixth grade when the pandemic happened. And, it's kind of a joke in our household, but our youngest still doesn't know the states. And I'm like, you're 14. Like, I know that was like critical content in fifth grade and you missed it, but like, you got to learn them at some point. It's kind of expected. But you know what? What really showed up during that time was the impact of the loss of connection because they were out of school, and the mental health impact. And what I think all of us that are already kind of in the workforce, we're trying to solve for that in a way. Like, no, people have to have a sense of connection, and we do as humans, but it doesn't need to be necessarily what it used to look like. So to your point, connection looks very different to my boys than maybe it does to my parents. And so
For
how do
sure.
we, and a one size fits all is just not the right solution ever anymore. And so I think that plays a role into it as well.
And
So I'm
so
reading I'm
go ahead,
reading this
Daniel.
book right now that I'm really enjoying, and it's Malcolm Gladwell's most recent book. It's called The Revenge of the Tipping Point. So it's a
Mm,
follow-up on his original book called The Tipping Point. And one thing he does, or what he does throughout the book, is he looks at different shifts in culture and society that have happened over the last 50, 60 years and looks at like the common elements of them. And one of the things that he looks at is like this absence of awareness or knowledge that the Holocaust happened in
mm,
the like in the US. Like apparently like it wasn't, the word Holocaust wasn't even a thing for 20-ish years, because there's this thing that he calls overstories. Like there's always an overstory. And for American Jews, the overstory was that it was a sign of weakness to talk about the Holocaust. So
mm,
because they didn't talk about what happened to them, that history wasn't passed down for decades. until somebody was able to change that overstory and say like, no, like we need to share this story so that we can make change in the future and people can be aware of this atrocity that happened. He talks about a lot of different overstories. Just the first one that I think of, and it
Yeah.
feels like the overstory in the US around work, as capitalists, it's that we can never rest. We always have to do more to win. And I think like right now, like we're seeing a strong reaction from the older generations, where we're seeing like the RTOs, and it might feel like we're losing the battle to change this overstory. But I think that if you look at TikTok or you look at Instagram, like you're saying, everyone's saying the same thing. Like that overstory is changing. It's like we aren't
Yeah.
defined by work. Like, yes, we live in a capitalist society, but like for most people, like that's not the most important thing in their life.
Right.
And another story that he talks about was gay marriage and how all of these activists were pushing for change. And in 2004, that's when, Bush came out with the famous speech, saying that uh, marriage should only be between a man and a woman, yada, yada, yada. And for a lot of the activists, they thought that they had lost. They were like, it's going to take another 20, 30 years before we're going to see a big change. But it ended up only taking, I think, like 10 years or I can't remember what year it was legalized when Obama was in office. But he said the change happened like decades. The overstory started changing decades earlier with some teleseries. I can't remember the name of the show, but at a time when half of the US was watching the same shows, it was a show about a family and one of their sons was gay and came out to them. And because that like shifted how people were thinking 20 years ago, took 20 something years for the change to happen, but like the narrative shift happened way before. So that's my long way of saying I feel like we're getting there with changing that like narrative, but I don't know like what it's going to
What's
take.
going to be, what is it going to take, y'all, for the tipping point to happen
Exactly.
on this
Yes.
overstory? What do you guys think? I'm just curious. Like, I feel like we talk a lot about these things and our audience is like nodding along like, yes, yes, yes. And so I'm curious, like, do either of you have thoughts on like what needs to happen for the overstory to change on work?
It almost feels like it's happening with the way that we consume information. In almost all of these cases, it had something to do with the media. So like in the case of us recognizing like the word like Holocaust and just having an understanding of what happened, it was again because of a docu-series that came out on primetime television. Everybody knew about it. And I feel like we're having a similar moment with social media where it feels like we're all saying the same thing. It's just like, yeah, I don't know. I guess to your point, Stephen, like I don't know what it's going to take for the people in positions of power to actually make change.
What are your thoughts, Michelle?
I think that, oh God, I don't know that I can wait 20 years, you guys, for this to like
That's why I'm
to happen.
asking.
I do think social media is the key. I do. I think so. I made a post on LinkedIn the other day. And sometimes when I talk about being a working mom in those early years, and it has been a long time, my oldest is 17, it feels like a lifetime ago. The post was around highlighting 3 companies that really help working moms. And if I had those companies when I was a new working mom, I wouldn't have gone through half of the struggles that I went through, and how there's just so many more resources and content. And so I'm hopeful that because of the way that we consume information, which you just said, that we're going to get there a lot faster. I also think that, I don't know, it almost feels like we are in this tug of war. Like I see one group of people on one side of the rope and another group of the people on the other side of the rope. And it feels like we're tugging right now. And I feel like the return to office is a little bit what that is. But I think people realized that there's so much more to life than work. And we used to say things like, you spend more time with your coworkers than your own family, so you should enjoy work. Shouldn't we be spending more time with our family and figuring out how to work differently?
Well, so I have a
I like
theory.
my coworkers, but I mean,
So like one of the things in the book that he talks about is how it takes about like 25 to 30% representation of a group to
Mm,
actually like make change and make an impact. And I don't
That's
know what
good
the
news.
numbers are, like how many millennials or Gen Z, I guess we could just go with millennials, like how many millennials are now in executive roles. Like I don't know what the percentages are, but maybe it's going to take us getting to that tipping point where it's 25 to 30% of the people in leadership positions are from these up and coming generations.
I disagree. I think that's going to be part of it, but I think it's going to come from the other end of the the new to career people, the people
mm,
entering the workforce. I think we need to get through this election. I think a lot of things are just on hold or in pause, or
right.
there's like positioning for like if this happens or if that happens, like we just want to be ready. So we'll see how all that plays out in a few weeks. Once we get past that, I think it's going to be a combination of. So Daniel, I think you mentioned Nick Bloom earlier. I think that's who the example you gave. And Nick just published a post today that was saying there are actually in office time has decreased at Amazon since they made like the return to office mandate. And I think that is what's going to be ultimately what changes. Like it's just going to be so big, such a big chunk of the workforce that won't change no matter what you do. I think it's going to get to the point where there's just complete resistance, and I think that's finally when we will start seeing change accelerate on this topic. But I'm hopeful it's not going to be 20 years, Michelle.
Mm.
There, to me, I believe a lot of people are burnt out with just the whiplash of work from home, hybrid, return to office. Like, what's it? All this uncertainty is just adding to the burnout
Yeah.
crisis.
Yeah.
But that's not everything. And so to switch gears, to keep this kind of thread, but switch gears a little bit, learning and development. I remember 2022-ish, there was feedback. I was still running an engagement survey company, so I was privy to a lot of engagement survey data. And the
Hmm.
feedback was there's not enough development opportunities at this company. And as a result,
Hmm.
I'm going to leave. Like this is a great
Hmm.
resignation time period.
Hmm.
And at the time, it was still go, go, go. Scale at any cost, right? We gotta, we just got a fresh round. We gotta make, or we acquired company ABC. We gotta the most out of this. But that hasn't gone away, in my opinion. The
Hmm.
lack of development opportunities, and I think you can extend that to me. Development is how am I learning and improving kind of my skill set, and it's
Hmm.
also development in terms of the progression of my career. And
Yep.
so I think that not only are people miserable in their jobs and the kind of state of uncertainty, but they're miserable because their buckets are not filled. Like I feel like we all need to develop, we all need to learn, and
Yes.
and that isn't happening. And so how does this fit in? You're obviously closer to some of the challenges with L&D. How does this play into, is this just Wertonomics and I'm making this up? Or
No, no,
are
no.
you all seeing some of this in the work you do?
Yeah, and this wasn't even in our prep call, and I'm like just like moving in my seat because I'm like so excited to share because like most things I feel very passionately about this. Okay, so in all of my previous companies, there is always this conversation. The associate engagement survey came back and nobody feels like they're getting learning and development. Nobody feels like they're getting that. And you know what happens? Every single HRBP and every single leader with the best of intentions is like, what 3-day class can I send my people to so they feel like they're getting developed? And we all know that these like magical transformational experiences are not happening in a 3-day workshop. They feel great. and there's like a couple of nuggets, but it really is the consistency. And so this is what companies and leaders don't do that drives that. This is based off of zero data, by the way, and just my own experiences. That's the disclaimer here. This is what they're not doing. So in Radical Candor, Kim Scott talks about having a conversation with every single one of your direct reports around what they want to do with their lives. It has nothing to do with on this team, at this company. It's just in your life, what do you want to do? What are your big, bold goals? And then what we should be doing is when we are having conversations about projects and work, we are linking why our teams and why the individuals on our teams are being placed on these projects. Hey, you want to, I don't know, run your own restaurant one day. Okay, so here are like the core things that like you as a human just need to practice, get exposure to in order to build that skill set to maybe go off and do that one day. You should be having conversations with your team on that's what the whole purpose of being on this project is. And so much of our conversations are on timelines, and a project comes in and leaders are like, who has time for this? That is the wrong conversation. You move projects around to give the projects to the people for their own development, for what they want to develop, and you have a constant conversation with them. It's not 3-day workshops, although I love all of the vendors out there that do 3-day workshops, but we're missing the conversation, and people are burnt out and they have too much going on and they just can't see the forest through the trees sometimes, myself included.
I guess if we think about the managers and helping them to have these conversations with each direct report, and we think about like the learning and the development for these managers,
Yep.
like, you know, how are you thinking about that piece of it?
I think you have to kind of attack it at all angles because, yes, for the managers, you need to put into your programs and also your talent strategy. If you have development plans, how are you having those conversations? And so how you instruct managers to do that is a piece of it. The other piece of it is that you have to have all of the leaders modeling it. And if you don't have the leaders modeling it, it doesn't matter what we teach in the manager programs. And so I do think it is an organizational culture issue where, you know, I think that I'm a huge fan of Radical Candor, but I know that not every organization can like really get their mind around it.
Yeah.
But I think that if you could just take this piece of having a conversation with the whole person, which I think collectively we've all decided that there is no longer the work person and the at-home person, it's just one person. So if you can find out what people want to do and what brings them joy, and you start modeling that, I think it just becomes easier.
Yeah.
I really wish there was data around how many managers are actually having one-on-ones with their people. I don't even know how you would get that, you know, like macro data, but
It still surprises me whenever I talk to friends or family and they tell me like, oh, I maybe have a one-on-one once a month, if that.
that's
Yeah.
consistent with what I hear also.
That's
Like
wild to me.
Yeah.
I'll ask people, like I'll talk to friends and they'll mention an issue because they know I run an HR podcast. So they're like, oh, maybe I can get some good advice from Steven. And I'll ask like, well, have you received feedback? Like, have you talked to your manager about this? And it feels like the answer is always no, I haven't.
I have my best friend is actually doing an interim director position where she works while they look for somebody else. Because she's like, I'm not doing that job. So she's the interim director, and she's telling me about this new team that she's running temporarily. And she said, "Oh, I gotta set up all these one-on-ones, you know, monthly." I said, "You're supposed to have one-on-ones weekly." And she said, "That's a lot of one-on-ones." I said, "It sure is. It sure is. It's a lot of one-on-ones, but that's what this looks like. That's what it looks like." And if you're not meeting weekly, and I think at some levels, you know, you can go to bi-weekly, but you're just not connected enough. And I think that back to our earlier conversation around like RTO and like working differently, I do think that people took advantage of the fact that you could just walk by somebody's desk. And I think you have to be a lot more intentional now, whether you're hybrid or whatever, even if it's just you're in the office, but you're super busy. I think you have to be a lot more intentional, but it is a lot of one-on-ones.
So I want to talk about intentionality, but switching gears,
Yeah.
and I want to talk about Gen Z.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're built different, and Gen Alpha is built even more different than that. And
But are they?
that this is why I want to talk about it. This is why I want to talk about it. Some may say actually these aren't generational differences, that these are just attributes of human beings. And over time the attributes may look different, but these have always been needs. They're manifesting themselves in different ways, maybe more audible, maybe more like in our face, with some of the younger generations. And so, like, let's start there. Like, what is your view on the notion that like Gen Z or Gen Alpha are going to be this huge disruption to the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do, right? As the older generations, and now all three of us are on the other side. And everybody else, this is what we do. With the incoming generation, we just can't believe how they show up, and they're just like so out there and so crazy. And I still remember all of the corporate trainings to get corporate employees training and education around this new weird generation called Millennials, who grew up in a time where they got participation trophies for everything they did. And so we're going to need to throw them a celebration.
Dude, this was like 10 years. Michelle,
literally.
Wasn't it like, I'm Gen X, so I remember this. And I remember it was like, all right, guys, we get it. They're different. Like, let's move on. But it was like a decade of talking about this.
Yes, it literally was like, are we going to have to throw parties for them when they make small accomplishments like that? And it sounds crazy now, but that's what people were getting trained on, these generational differences. And I think that, the role of the older generation is to help transition the younger generation into the workforce. Their role is to come in and challenge everything. It just is, because how else are we supposed to evolve? And, when Daniel and I were talking about this, I said, I think we're just all being assholes, because this has always happened with every generation. Where I think the difference is with Gen Z specifically, and maybe Gen Alpha, depending, but Gen Z specifically is, can we just take a moment and think about what they've been through? I mean, the trauma alone of COVID, not just their own personal trauma, but the fact that they are raised by the adults who went through the trauma of COVID, people dying, losing your jobs, not knowing what was going to happen, not being able to leave your house, wearing gloves to the grocery store. I mean, that is a collective traumatic experience. Now let's layer in all of the economics. You can't buy a house. You can't even move out because rent's too expensive. It is really hard to be Gen Z. And all I see people talking about is they don't have the same customer service skills. You guys, they cannot make eye contact, and that is a problem. That is not a problem. The problem is you're being an asshole and you don't remember what it's like to be fresh out of college, really young, not sure what's going on, and looking for some like advice and guidance. And I think we're not being fair. I really don't. And I love Gen Z. I think they're amazing. I have two of them. They're going to change the world. They're going to bring this 4-day work week into existence, you guys.
They are. I think they really are. I do agree on the point that as humans, we all have similar, need and desires as it comes, as it relates to work and how we would like to work. One thing that's undeniable is that Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they are built different when it comes to technology. I got my first cell phone as a millennial when I was in like 7th grade. I think my little brother got his first smartphone when he was like 9. And I imagine that the age is probably even younger now. Like the younger generation's ability to just like pick up any new technology compared to us. Also, just like how they expect information to be delivered to them. Like, I think
Agreed.
everybody has like their own laptop at schools. It's crazy. Like, it's just a totally different world how they're learning in school.
Yep.
And I feel like where we need to catch up on the L&D front and just thinking about like designing L&D programs, it just like it's probably just so obvious to them like when it's lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that and like where you think we need to make immediate changes.
Yeah, I think that there's like the two biggest shifts I think we're going to see is, I said it a little bit earlier, is that the one size fits all approach is gone. We knew it wasn't a great solution, but especially for large organizations, it's really difficult to not have a one size fits all solution. And to your point, Daniel, like when they are consuming content that they have self-selected, they are naturally going through the process of, this resonates with me, this does not resonate with me, and they're picking and choosing. And when you think about L&D from a corporate perspective, you just get your list of courses and you don't get a selection. So I think the one size fits all leaves. I also think this is going to be a bold statement because there's no solution for it yet, but I think e-learning is dead. My youngest, who is 14, he also likes to tell me this. He's always like, e-learning's like really dead. I said, I know, I get it. I think e-learning is really soon going to be the equivalent of the person that used to roll in the TV VCR combo and put in the VHS tape and had a whole room of people watch the training video that was
Oh my God.
mailed out. Like, I think that that's what e-learning almost already is, to be really honest, but there's not a great solution, which is why it's a bold statement. But yeah, I think that e-learning is dead, and I think we're going to see a huge shift in one size fits all is gone.
Would you be open to I'm not expecting you to have all of the answers. We don't have all the answers, but for our last 2 or 3 minutes, it could be fun to
Yeah.
just like brainstorm like what
Oh,
some solutions could look like.
I'm going to go first because I have
yeah.
a
Go.
couple of thoughts and ideas here.
Yeah.
I think cohort-based learning
Mm-hmm.
is going to be a thing. I
Yeah.
had no idea. And earlier this year, when I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do post selling my engagement survey startup, I was like, I feel like I need to just sharpen my skills. I haven't been an HR practitioner. I thought I might do HR consulting.
Yeah.
So I joined a cohort, an academy, and it was an 8-week thing. And it was so refreshing to just have a specific module that I could consume. I could consume it in a variety of different ways. All of the transcripts were provided, PowerPoints were provided. It literally was like, take what you want, how you want it, and we're going to talk about this on Friday. So be ready for the conversation. And then on Monday, we had an Ask Me Anything with the people facilitating the session. And it was the first time that I had been in a class or course like that. It was either like call it like a physical class that I had participated in the past, and I honestly would have thought like I thought I would get something out of this cohort based learning, but I had no idea that it would be so much more enjoyable in so many different ways because I
Mm-hmm.
learned, I networked, I got to hear other people's opinions and points of view. And so that's one trend I think that or one solution that I think it solves multiple workplace challenges we have right now: connection, engagement, learning, and development. Right. So that's my contribution to our brainstorm: cohort-based learning.
Michelle, you have anything?
I mean, I agree. And I would say with cohort based learning, the companies that are doing it right are also layering in the experts to help. So yes, like cohort based learning is so important, but also like I always say, like I think the trades are going to make a comeback. I think that AI is going to revolutionize white collar jobs, and I think the trades are going to make a comeback. I think that in person cohort based is going to make a comeback, because I think that the networking piece, the connection, everything you said, I think is spot on. I would say, there's always been this desire for people to move faster and put out their own content. So at companies, how do you have the equivalent of like a Wikipedia? Like, how are people just like, how do you just move faster to get content out? I think that that's what a lot of the TikTok, Instagram, even podcasts have done, right? It doesn't have to be $1 million like production. It can literally just be like, here's the video. So I think that's the other thing, is kind of democratizing the way that learning content gets developed.
Yeah. And the last thing that I'll add, because I know we only have 4 more minutes, but I think there's something, I feel like not many people have quite cracked like the community play for like different industries, but I don't know. I could see, I'm just speaking for myself. Like I've been a part of marketing communities as a B2B marketer and felt like I learned a lot from my peers that were in that group. I feel like maybe there's like a more scalable solution that's like segmented by your years of experience, by like within marketing, within B2B marketing, there are a bunch of different specialties. I don't know. Like I feel like there's something there with like learning from your community. And it's like part online community. You're having like these in-person meetups. Maybe you have like a local network of people that are in that community with you. I feel like a lot of C-level people have that
Yeah.
already,
Yes.
but it doesn't feel like there are that many options for more junior folks. And I don't know how to solve
Agreed.
that problem, but
Agreed.
just an observation.
Yeah.
I kind of like this brainstorm segment, Daniel.
Mhm.
I know we're
It's
way
good,
off
guys.
script, guys. We're way off script,
Did not
and
use the
but
script at all.
but that's great. That's always a sign of a great podcast, in my opinion. But we're at that point. I think we all have hard stops, and we have a few traditions to get through. The next one is what we call rapid fire questions. Same set of questions we ask every guest. Are you ready to do this, Michelle?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. All right. First question. How do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
I think a modern people leader is willing to try new things, get uncomfortable, and fundamentally cares about each person at their organization for what they want to do with their lives versus what is the ROI that you can bring to my organization.
Love it. Next question. If you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old Michelle, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
This is probably not relevant anymore because now we have the internet, but I do feel like I didn't even know. I just knew that I was a creative and I didn't want to sit at a desk like my mom did. And I didn't know anything outside of what jobs I saw in my family and the standard teacher, doctor, lawyer, police officer, nurse that we talk about. And so the advice would be to meet people who do different things in different industries with different jobs. And I think that's a lot easier now with social media, and just learn what's out there.
I would tell 22-year-old Michelle, it's going to get better than property management or whatever. It
So
will get
sad.
better. It will get
Guys, it was
better.
so sad. And bless the people in property management. This was a me issue, not a industry issue.
There's a job for everyone, but that one was
There
not for
is.
you.
No.
Next question. Is there anything you believe to be true about the world of work, but you don't have the data to support it?
I think we're already working 4 days a week.
Oh, yes.
That's
If
so
you
true.
just go anywhere in Austin on a Friday and you'll get the data to support
I
it.
heard you guys talking about that, and I found that fascinating. I think we're already doing it.
Yeah, I agree. All right, last rapid fire question. Who would you bring on to the show next?
Okay, so I have 2 suggestions. One is the CEO of Buffer, Joel Gascoigne. I don't know have you already talked to him?
No, but we do want to interview more CEOs, so.
Yeah, he is trying all the things and does not seem to be scared to fail. And they have a 4-day work week. They work asynchronously. They just did a whole pilot on no meetings. I think he's really interesting. And then the other person I would suggest is Greg Creed, who used to be the CEO at Yum and was also the CEO at Taco Bell when I was there. And he is the most incredible culture leader that I have ever seen at an organization.
Can you say his name one more time?
Greg Creed.
Okay, got it.
Creed.
Cool.
He's retired now, but not retired. Like, he's still very much in the mix.
Wow. Well, those both would be amazing guests, and we'd be honored to have either or both. So we'll definitely follow up. That gets us to our last ritual and tradition on the show. We call it one word or phrase close. So we all respond with a word or a few words. Just as we reflect on this amazing conversation, as we were kicking it off, I was like, this is the best part of the week, right as we hit record. And man, it did not disappoint. So what do you have for us, Michelle? We like our guests to go first.
I feel like a broken record. 4-day work week. I'm just like putting it out there, you guys. Like, 4-day work week.
I'll let you go next, Daniel.
I'm going to say let's get to the tipping point and as fast as possible.
Yep.
Hopefully not.
And I'm going to say I'm going to go with youth, because I think youth is going to be a key part of this. So, and I think we're all young, and I don't mean just the technically young people, because we all have that part of us. That's a key takeaway for me in this conversation. So, Michelle, wow, what an amazing! Will you come back and just chat? Can we be friends? This is so much
obviously.
fun.
And I feel like we could start a business after this, after a few of the ideas. So yes, I will come back. We can do anything you would like to do.
Now you're speaking to, now you know how to get to a man's heart. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy. We've had a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Bye, guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.